Okie dokie. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to July's Planning Lunches at Noon webinar brought to you by the Office of Planning and Development at the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs. Today's webinar is Housing Strategies in Lebanon. I'm Noah Hodgetts, the Principal Planner in the Office of Planning and Development at BEA. Today we are joined by Nathan Reichert, who is the Planning and Development Director for the City of Lebanon, and his colleague, Catheryn Hembree, who is the city's Associate Planner. This webinar is eligible for AICP certification, CM, continuing maintenance credits for APA certified planners. So you can complete this. If you complete this webinar, you can claim CM credits in accordance with APA and AICP guidelines. Just for a quick reminder on how to use the Microsoft Teams webinar controls, please put your questions in the chat. Nate and Catheryn will do the best to answer them throughout the webinar. And if we have additional time at the conclusion of the webinar, we'll answer any remaining questions at that time. With that out of the way, I'm going to go and turn things over to our speakers, Catheryn and Nate.
Hi, everybody. So if anyone was at the New Hampshire Planning Association conference in infill, this is a repeat, and I apologize for that. But it's very interesting. So hopefully you'll enjoy it for a second time. So in Lebanon, we're going to talk about two different projects we're currently working on. I'm going to talk to you about pattern zones in our new zoning overlay district. And then Nate's going to take it over and talk about Barrows Street, and it's a city-sponsored cottage court development. So what is pattern zones? The basic idea of this is we're using what's in the existing built environment to create zoning amendments that reflect what's in the built environment. For example, I live in a 130-year-old house in the downtown grid pattern section of Lebanon. And my house is probably 5 feet from the property line. Under current zoning, that would not be allowed anymore, but that's what is all over my neighborhood. So we're taking instances like that and be like, hey, this is really common in this neighborhood. Let's make it legal. And in doing so, we're going to be able to increase density. So these are some examples of where the pattern zones is already existing in Lebanon. The picture closer to the bottom shows 3 houses that are very, very close to each other on tiny lots, less than a quarter-acre lots. And then the other picture shows 3 duplexes all on the same lot, and it's less than a half-acre lot, but you have 6 units of housing in that area. These are the 2 areas of Lebanon where we're having our overlay district. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Lebanon, but we have 2 core downtowns. We have Lebanon proper, which is where the Green and the Opera House and City Hall is. And then we have West Lebanon, which is right at the Connecticut River, right beside Vermont. And these are both old neighborhoods, grid pattern streets, with prime, like downtown commercial areas. So this slide has a lot of information in it, but the main gist of it is the denser the lot, the more affordable housing gets. And so we have the red area shows what it would cost to build a single, or what it costs to buy a single family home with, like, based on current construction cost. And then as you go down towards the darker blue, where you have roommates in like a cottage section, you can see how much more affordable it is. One thing about pattern zones is that it's not an affordable housing solution. If any housing is created through pattern zones, it's still going to be market rate. So this isn't a way to create affordable housing. It's just a way to get more housing in Lebanon, which we need. We need affordable housing and we need market rate housing. I think we have a 3% vacancy rate and the healthy rate is 5 to 8%. So we really need all types of housing. Our city council and residents in general don't want to increase roommate boarding house options. They are allowed with a special exception now, and they don't want to make it by right. So we pretty much went to where it says small cottage courts, like the teal color. So we allow everything from that color over to the red. And this is just a cool graphic showing how you can fit different type of housing onto a lot. So the first one shows like 2 houses. Then you have a house in like an ADU, and then you have a house in 2 ADUs. And all the lots are about, I think, a third to half of an acre, if I remember. Okay, so what did we do zoning wise to make these changes? One of the first things we did is reduce the minimum lot size. So under our old zoning or our traditional zoning, you had to have a 10,000 square foot lot. No matter where you were, 10,000 square foot lot. And we changed it to, if you're in the overlay district, it's 4,000 square feet now. So that's a massive change. So we're hoping with this change, a lot of people that do have the larger lots will be able to split them and maybe sell the vacant lot, and someone else would be able to develop it. And then we also changed the street frontage requirements. So now we have 3 different categories. If you have a traditional lot where you're right on the street, you need 40 feet. If you have a flag-shaped lot, you need 15 feet to fit the driveway in. And then we are also allowing streets with, or lots with no frontages. As long as there's a deeded easement with the neighbor in front to use the driveway, you can have a lot with 0 frontage. Between that and being able to have a smaller lot size, we should have some lot splitting going on. And these are some examples of prime examples where you could split the lot and not have frontages. They're both large lots. There's plenty of room in the vacant areas to like build another house. Sorry, we just had a question come up. Is a deeded easement also for routing utilities? I imagine that's where utilities would be ran. It is not specified in our zoning ordinance. Our zoning ordinance just says for pass and repass. But I imagine it'd be the easiest way to run utilities is to go through the easement. Okay. And these are just some more examples of very large lots we have downtown that could be split. Okay, setbacks, like I explained with my house earlier, it's right on the property line, just very narrow space. So we reduced the setback. So now you have to have 10-foot rear yard easement and 5-foot side yard easements. And we do have some provisions, like if you're on a corner lot, you don't need 10 feet on both sides. You can have 10 feet and 7.5 feet. To hopefully make it a little bit easier to fit houses into a smaller lot. So one thing we changed, we kind of flipped this. Our old zoning ordinance had a building coverage requirement, and now we're just looking at impervious cover. And you're allowed 60% by right, 60 to 80% by special exception. And you need to get variance for anything over that 80%. Okay, lot density. So how many people do you actually want living downtown? This is an example of some small lots we have already existing in Lebanon. The one in the middle is tiny, was at 0.1 acres. And that's a 4,000 square foot lot. They're already existing downtown. Our assistant city manager lives a block down from me. His lot's 5,000 square feet, I believe, and he just added an ADU to his property. So it's very doable with this size lot. By right, we're allowing 1 and 2 families and accessory dwelling units. And then you would still need to get a special exception if you're going denser than that with triplexes or quadplexes. Okay, these are just more great examples of lots that could be split to add more density. Okay, lot divisions. So we'd really like to see more cottage court style land divisions, and Nate will get into that because that's what the Barrows Street Project is, and it's in a pattern zone overlay district. And I already talked about this, the eliminate the lot frontage for right to pass and repass. Oh, and we also create a maintenance agreement because it snows a lot here. We don't want the neighbors fighting over who's going to clean off the driveway or who's going to make repairs to it. And we already have lots without frontages in Lebanon. It's nothing new. We just want to make them legal, and hopefully more people will do them. I mentioned this briefly before. City council residents, they don't want roommate boarding house styles of structures downtown. Right now, we allow 4 unrelated roommates, but we live in a college town. We have Dartmouth College less than 5 miles away. And I'm sure it's always in the back of everyone's mind that we don't want a frat house as our next door neighbor. So we are keeping it at 4 unrelated people. Parking, we reduced our parking minimums to 1 space per dwelling unit. The consultants we use actually recommended eliminating parking requirements at all. But like many places in New Hampshire, we have a winter parking ban, so street parking is not an option. So we decided to go with 1 space per dwelling unit. And another thing we added is a shade requirement. I'm from Georgia. I worked for 10 years in Georgia. You see this a lot down south where it's a lot hotter. And as the world's getting hotter, I think you're going to see this more and more. So we're trying to get a jump on this. But, strategically placed trees so it shades the house from the afternoon sun, or large parking lots have trees just to keep it cooler. One thing we are considering that we don't have the details worked out yet is a catalog for our resident with housing plans that they can use for free. We're still in negotiations with this, trying to figure out how exactly to make this happen. But these are some house plans that we considered. We offered single family and 2 family homes in this catalog, ranging from 1 bedroom to 3 bedroom. And I think the largest one was about 1,800 square feet. And along with this, we had a problem come up. Is in the zoning ordinance, we wrote that you were required to use the house catalog. And the first person that called and asked us about using pattern zones wanted to do a stacked triplex. And we didn't have that in the catalog. And so under zoning, they would have to get a variance from something that we don't even provide. And that did not seem fair at all. And so I am currently writing a zoning amendment to eliminate that issue. And hopefully that'll get approved in January with the rest of the zoning amendments.
Catheryn, we have another question.
Oh, we have a question. Nice who designed these templates? So it's a mixture of different architects. The consulting firm we worked with a Hawk grant, they had ties to different architects, and so they were able to pull in like a bunch of plans for us just to flip through. And we're like, okay, what has the best New England architecture? What do we already see downtown? And that's where these couple plans came from, is they were just, this would match the existing neighborhoods. But I don't have a specific person. Another company that submitted house plans that we want to use is Nexus Studios in White River Junction, Vermont. They already had a bunch of cottage houses they planned for Hurricane Irene reconstruction. And they said that we could use those too. And I just don't have pictures of them in this slide, but we're going to use them with something very similar for Barrows Street. So you'll see those in a second. Okay,
Yeah,
did you say? Another
is-
question.
Do you require these plans to be used per the zoning ordinance? Could you elaborate on that? I can take that a little bit. I think
Yeah.
right now, as we were passing this through city council, I kind of gave them three options. Option A is thou shalt use the pattern book. Option B is we have the ability to include an architect in the project and then therefore be able to get an approval through the inclusion of an architect. Or option C, which is live free or die, do whatever you want.
Well,
And
it was
we option
design
city
guidelines.
council. Yeah, with design. Yeah, I overstated. I apologize, but at the end of the day, that city council in the first policy decided that they wanted to mandate it have to come from the book. The issue that we've run into is that we're still in negotiations with the provider, trying to get access to a book of and being able to use those designs. Until we get that put in place, we're a little bit behind the eight ball. We need to get that sorted out. We're unable to get a book contract with the consultant, then we'll have to do that on our own. And we're exploring those options as well. Ideally, the one major issue that we've had with the provider we've worked with is this: they're based out of the South, they're based out of Arkansas, and there are substantial design differences between what you build in Arkansas and what you build in New Hampshire. And as a consequence, reconciling those differences in the plans, well, aesthetically, the buildings are lovely, but when you start pulling back the curtain a little bit, you realize that there's a lot of insulation, there's a lot of roof loads, snow loads, things like that. When you get on the building side of this, that we would have to add to the plan sets in the form of notes that our building official has added to them. They're all pre-approved, and some of them have as many as 10 pages worth of notes that needed to be added to accommodate for the design changes. And that's been one of our issues with the vendor, is that we need to have plan sets that people can build in New Hampshire. In the plan sets that were available through this vendor, we're more narrowly focused on sort of Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, and that's been a problem. We're trying to get around it. Sharing the name of the Vermont company again, it's Nexus Studios. They're in White River Junction. We've worked with them. They worked with, after Irene, they created a catalog of about 10 cottage designs that they made available to the public to be able to put in again, small, efficient cottage homes that you can put into would be a perfect design for an ADU in a backyard. It would be a small infill lot that you could work with. And they've been terrific to work with. And I think if there's an area that we could really see further development on this topic in New Hampshire, is using, local New Hampshire architects who design to our building code requirements and also are sensitive to sort of the New England palette of architecture. Those three things would be very helpful. In the end, we started with a pattern book, what was 150 designs.
Oh yeah.
And then we were able to narrow those down through a lot of just discussions with the public, and the public really had a lot to say in what the designs that they're in the book.
Yeah. We started out with our planning board chairs and our heritage commission chairs, like flipping through and completely eliminating some of them, saying there's no way that we could ever build this in New England. And then after we got it narrowed down, then we did a public survey and let the public vote on their top 10. And then that's how we narrowed down to the examples I showed you.
And then we did tabling went to the farmers market, and we did as much public outreach as we could. And we whittled it down to a book of about 20 designs. And again, it's just a question of, that's a major component to the proposition. The public proposition is, in exchange for reducing requirements on the zoning, to lowering setbacks, to increasing density, we're also going to have some constraints on this, which are, you have to have architecturally designed infill housing that meets the neighborhood. And I think that was a very big key, that proposition, that if you voted yes, and this passed by referendum, it was nearly 70% passed, which is terrific. The public understood that was the bargain that we were offering. We're going to get more density, but the density we get and the buildings that we get are going to be more nuance to the local neighborhood.
Match the historic character of the neighborhood.
There you go. Do you want me to dive into Barrow Street, or does anybody
Go
else
for
have questions about, as we go forward, type in questions, we'll immediately just address them. You know, it's tougher. We had a great give and take at the planners meeting, but we were all in the same room. This is the format's a little harder this way, but if anybody has a question, type it in. We'll try to get an answer going. It'd be nice to have a little bit more back and forth, but just the format of having about 50 people on a call, it makes it hard. So I will get into Barrow Street, which is, I think the premise of the Barrow Street project are two pieces coming together. And I think the first one is that every community all over the country has property that the city owns. And at the time that the city got control of that property, it was likely considered to be nearly worthless. Usually it's a tax sale. It's the two remaining lots in a subdivision that never sold. You know, somebody quits paying property taxes on it, and then the city ends up owning it, or the town ends up owning it, based on tax sale. So you have these parcels of land that sit throughout our community that are these orphans and are sort of forgotten by history. And we found that we went shopping in our own cupboard, and said, hey, wow, we do have enough. We can make a nice dinner here. Hey, we've got this, we've got that. Let's put this together. Let's be creative. And I think that's something I would challenge all of the planners across the state to. If you're looking for potential development lots for housing, look at what the city already owns or what the town already owns, because there may be some real gems that you can find and polish up. We did just that. We had, when I first arrived here in Lebanon, which is about 3 years ago, my predecessor, Mr. Brooks, said we have 25 lots that we've done the initial look at. We need the planning department to look at each of those lots even further and see which ones are more developable, or whether we should sell them to the general public. Are there things we need to do to make them saleable, or are there some that are immediately outright developable? And we arrived at the Barrow Street property, which was a series of lots that the city had owned. It's a combination of land that was left over from the 89 interstate project, in addition to several other lots. The city has owned this for nigh on about 80 years, and it's just the end of a street, and there was nothing there. It had a little bit of wetland concerns that we needed to deal with, but we were able to get permitting to fill one small wetland that was, when we literally marched the Conservation Commission through the wetland, they found out that it was more full of garbage than it was wildlife habitat. And we were able to get the permitting pulled together to get the site plan set. So what we've done with Barrow Street is really take parcel of land and move forward with developing it with the city project team. So that, again, we had I just started talking and didn't get to my notes, so I apologize for that. So I'll get back to my notes. Again, the city council asked us in 2022 to look at what we have in our own cupboard, see what's available. We married the Barrow Street lots, we pulled them together, and we consolidated them into about a 2.9 acre lot. And then we also took, there was a New Hampshire grant that we were able to take the dollars from that, and we created a fund that we will be able to use for soft costs for some of these development ideas. You know, some of these things we're going to need to have, you know, surveying and wetlands delineations and you know, the soft costs that go into pulling together a development. We have a pot of dollars, and the theory is that we take these dollars, we marry them with local lots that are orphaned, and we build a project around what's the rational thing to do. And we've done Barrow Street. We've also got 3 or 4 others, one of which what we needed to do is a wetlands delineation. It was a wet lot. Everybody knew it was wet, but by doing the wetlands delineation, we're able to identify 2 building pads that you could put a very reasonable sized home on. And we're looking now at splitting that lot in half, selling it in 2 lots, and allowing the individual property owner to develop those as single family homes. So again, going through that inventory of city property, what do we already own? we don't have to go buy anything. It makes a natural subsidy for a project because the city, in some cases, may have owned it for decades, but more importantly, now you're taking what is now not generating any revenue whatsoever, and you're converting it into a revenue stream in the form of taxes, building tax base while you're doing it. And in some cases, recouping what is often an abandoned lot that the neighbors have slowly crept into, and they think it's theirs almost. That is one issue. You cannot adversely possess the city. It's not possible to do that. So even if it's been used by a neighbor for some reason for years, they still are not going to be able to adversely possess. So it does cause a little bit of stress when the neighbors think it's theirs, when in reality it is not. But I think that looking at those pieces of property, we found 19 different parcels that are developable, and we've moved forward with 2 of them directly and potentially 5 once we continue moving. So we had sites all over the city. This was this lot that was wet. We were able to get a wetlands delineation and break it into pieces a little bit. This is the Barrows Street site, what it looked like when we started. Again, we had the end of the Barrows Street coming in, and we were looking to do a cottage development. Again, high density development, highly designed development, so that we can have, the goal is to have these 5 houses that are going to go into Barrows Street be focused on city employees and school district employees. Right now, 70% of the people that work for the city of Lebanon do not live in the city of Lebanon, and in many cases are not able to afford housing in the city of Lebanon, which is not a particularly great place to be. And it is a human resources concern, because recruiting highly qualified talent to bring them to our community is difficult, because people have to have a fine place to stay and then live. And my lived experience was when I got here 3 years ago, it was very difficult for me to find a house for the family, and because the competitive nature of the real estate market. So we're going to say first right of refusal is to the city and city employees, school district employees, and we're also introducing what we hope to be an affordability matrix to this, so that as there is a little bit of upside potential, but when they get ready to resell, to move on to their next home, that the city has the opportunity to get another city employee in there, that the upside gets limited so that it remains an affordable home. We're looking at options in that space as well. So again, this is sort of one of the preliminary drawings that was pulled together, 5 lots or 5 homes, sort of community parking area. You've got garbage storage. We did have a small wetland we filled here. The rest over on this side is wet, but it also needs to remain vegetated because it butts up against Interstate 89. So we want to keep a barrier, a sound barrier in place by keeping all the vegetation in place on that side of the lot as well, aesthetically as well as from sound. Again, we passed the cottage court zoning was done in my first year that I was here, when we were working on, was really led by then Mayor McNamara, really pushed it through. Again, the concept is that you have small communities that are centered around a community centered hub. It's community space in the middle, and then as you approach further into one of the cottages, you pass through a small garden area that is privately controlled by the individual who owns the home. That passes onto a porch. Again, open space, public space moving to private space. And as that happens, you have the porches on the front of the house, not the rear, so that as your neighbors are walking by, you're more apt to say, hey, how you doing today? How's the day? Hey, I've got some beverages in the refrigerator. Would you like to join me while I'm sitting on the deck? It actually promotes interaction of the neighbors and brings back a sense of community in a way that many of our communities are simply missing. We're not connecting as humans, as people, as neighbors in the way that we were in previous generations. And that in and of itself is a cultural issue we're going to have to work on. But oftentimes, good design of space can help promote people being able to encourage people to be able to interact and get to know their neighbors more, and therefore overcome some of our issues, as we say. It's easier to when you know your neighbor, it's easier to understand when they put that political sign in their front yard, and you're a little more forgiving when you're on friendly terms. So again, Nexus Studios is sort of working with Studio Nexus is the architectural firm that we work with, and this is a design. We're going to be including these designs in our pattern book when they come around. We want to be able to have this cottage court design reproducible. Again, simple designs, nothing that's really over the top, well thought through, a porch on the front, ability to have a basement that you can fill in, that you can build out if you need to. Again, that's space that will eventually come along, maybe a story and a half, and being able to have really dense, tight, not a huge house. We want to keep them smaller, and that really it becomes more affordable by design. Unfortunately, the number we've gotten into, we just brought a project manager on board in the last 2 weeks who's going to do the sort of the clerk of the works project. He'll run the subcontractors and so on and so forth. The city has decided to move forward as the general contractor. We're going to be, hiring our clerk of the works who is going to manage the project on site. And we will do that moving forward, which is a big choice because there was a big discussion of getting it to being project ready, getting all the permits, getting planning approvals, zoning approvals, all of those things completed, and then taking that project and selling it to the private market and letting the private market develop it as a project. The city has, in this case, decided we're going to retain control of the build and understand it. When we move on, again, the purpose is to say we want to have low income, and not low income, but we want to have a subsidized housing source in an area where we can have city and SAU 88 employees being able to have a place that they can land in. Even with that, we're still looking at we have a grant from the state for $155,000 to help us with infrastructure that we were able to obtain because we're a housing champion. We also have zero lot costs because the city has included this. We are still looking, and we're not looking to have a profit motive other than just recapturing the dollars that we have invested. We do have staff time that we won't be reimbursed. We have a terrific, our engineering department, Rod came from the private sector and done this type of development. Mayor McNamara is leading the team. But even then, we're still looking at, if we could just go in, we're still looking at $400,000 a unit, which is massive. I would not, under any circumstances, say that is affordable, but in today's market, that's where we're at. It's the cost of what we're looking at. I think that, the size of the cottage courts, again, I think that was part of the discussion about wanting to make them larger or smaller. We went with the 1,500 number. You can see terrific design in those smaller houses. But again, you look at the costs are often what drives much of it. But as far as the 1,500 square foot size, it should be that and lower. We don't want them to be bigger than 1,500 square feet. Again, you look at the overall market in the Upper Valley. I think this is probably true amongst much of the real estate markets across the state. Our market's effectively frozen. The elegant cycle of people moving through our real estate market is not taking place on an efficient way. And part of the city's role, we feel, is to help unthaw some of that, at least contribute to unthawing that frozen market. We have extreme shortages of available developable land. Labor is even worse than that. And I think the other part is we don't have entrepreneurs that are out seeking to put deals together in the marketplace in a way that's helping to contribute to it. So when we start breaking down our concerns and our issues, it's really significant. Well, it's not just regulations, folks. It's a whole slug of things that are causing our housing issues. And for those people who think that if we just get government out of the way, we're going to have housing spring up everywhere, I think they're just sadly mistaken. Because you have to have a willing buyer, someone to build land, somebody to build it, and someone to put it all together. And unfortunately, those are all in very short supply. Again, there's stress with some conservation interests. We've seen this become a pattern here in the Upper Valley. Our Conservation Commission right now has $1.4 million in their checkbook. And when landowners find that they want to sell part of their land, they want to conserve it, the first place they call is the Conservation Commission. And there's a lot of land that comes off the market before it even goes on, and therefore is not developable because it never got onto the market. So there's really needs to be a balance and a straight conversation with our conservation commissions that say, you may have $1.4 million in your checking account to buy land, but is all of the land that you're buying really what we need to have for conservation, or can elements of that be used for, maybe it's one or two houses, maybe it's a small development, but there's ways to really have a balancing conversation with our conservation friends, because it really does impact the lack of availability of land to develop. Again, people don't want to move our cheese. People don't want to change anything, and that overcoming that could be extraordinarily difficult. That's part of what we do as planners. We overcome the objections of the neighbors as best we can by having good, solid, thoughtful rules in place. People follow the rules in an orderly way, then they can get to yes. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm just following the conversation. Conversation with the Conservation Commission is one that's really important, because especially here in the Upper Valley, there needs to be a balance there, and we've got that conversation underway currently. I think then the final one is when we look at the extreme uncertainty coming from our HUD partners in Washington, D.C., that we talked to the not-for-profit and the low-income housing developers. They are absolutely beside themselves with how they're going to move forward with HUD cutting programs and just, or not funding them, or for that matter, not even having people available to pick up the phone and answer it. I think there's some real difficulties coming in the way we've done some of those types of developments on the financing side that are going to further challenge our ability to build housing in an effective, affordable way. So you put all of those things together, we do have a stressful times, but we've come up with two thoughts here in Lebanon. This trying to pull together the Barrows Street Project, prove the concept that cottage zoning and cottage houses can work, and then also the pattern zones where we say, let's make downtown legal again. Let's let the neighborhoods that we really value, that are terrific neighborhoods, allow them to continue to grow and develop and provide more homes. I am looking at Kyle's comment. Let's go back to lots with no frontage. How are you ensuring requirements of RSA are being met? Specifically, provision says private easement or right of way does not constitute as frontage, and therefore cannot be issued a building permit unless easement meets criteria set forth in the statute. We did go through legal review with what we have, and everything has been reviewed by our legal counsel and said that we met those necessary provisions. I think we require, as part of this easement, you have to have the right to pass and repass. You have to have the ability to access, but also you have to have a maintenance agreement in place between all those folks that are involved. That I've found that without a maintenance agreement, things fall apart very quickly. So I would say we're meeting those standards, but legal counsel would have reviewed that in the review of the ordinance before it went to council.
Yeah, and we're not getting into private street territory. We're just doing it for two structures. It's not like we're creating a whole new neighborhood.
We're also debating, one of the other things we're talking about adding is, I think right now we limit a driveway can only serve no more than two houses. We may be moving that to 3 or 4, depending upon. Sometimes it triggers the need to name the driveway or name the street, and we're working through some of that right now. It's legally how can we thread that needle and make it work appropriately for everybody. Again, it thoughtful, organized development on the front end and answering these questions before the snow falls and nobody knows who's going to plow the driveway. That you answer those questions so that people can walk in with eyes wide open.
How many different underlining zones are in your overlay districts? Right now it's R2 and R3 is where The patterns and overlay districts only going to impact the residential zoning districts. Part of the overlay districts are like downtown commercial districts, but this doesn't apply to them. So it's R2, R3, I believe.
Yeah, but it covers over and it does change a lot of zoning from it. R3 is our primary main zoning district for residential, and it includes big swaths of that. So there are some significant changes that were brought to bear with what we did. I will conclude. I think we got 20 minutes. I think it's one where if people have questions, we'll sit and answer them. I think it's the lived experience of having gone through this has been informative to us. I think the consultants helped us understand, sort of that. We go back to the big slide. I would say the $150,000 slide is the one that talks about the costs,
Affordability, yeah.
affordability, and that's based on their studies that were part of the consulting package that we put together. I think this slide right here is the one that's really the takeaway for the analysis that many of the communities can do. And I don't know that Lebanon, we are a leader in price costs, and our rental rates are through the roof.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is nothing that's new for many of the folks across the state. But as we look at these options, it really says where we have thoughtful density being put into place, you can start building some more affordable by design housing stock. And you could do so in a way where you're not just going in and bulldozing down an existing block of older homes and putting in a bunch of new apartment blocks. You can do this in a thoughtful, organized way. And this is one of the things that we left off this slide, but really, if the recommendation was that if all of these elements, now Lebanon is a city of about 16,000 people. The expectation is just in those areas in our overlay district that if we fully implemented all of the recommendations of the study, that we could get another 4,500 people living in those existing neighborhoods without having a massive impact on the architectural character of those existing neighborhoods. That's powerful. That's growing our community by nearly a quarter of its population. And our matriculation rate was expected to be out through about 2040 for this to slowly seep into the process.
And I will say the entire overlay district is served by sewer and water. So like septic and wells are not an option in the overlay district.
Yep.
That's an important part.
So again, folks, well, first, thank you, Catheryn and Nate. This was great. Again, folks, we do have about 15 minutes left for questions. So if you haven't already, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Unfortunately, we're not able to unmute folks.
Yeah.
I do have a couple questions. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, if you do want a copy of our overlay district text, email me and I can send you a copy of it.
Great. In the kind of while we wait for a few more questions to come in, I have, well, first, I think there was one up in the chat. Yeah, I think we did miss. I think this was for Barrows Street. The question was, is there a limited equity mechanism? If you saw that one, Nate.
I think as far as the limit, if I understand limited equity and how you're using it, that we are going to try to, two things. One, on the financing side, we're working with a couple of the local banks to be able to say that this person works for the city, they work for the school district, and we're going to be able to set up a financing mechanism that allows them to get nearly 100% financing. And then we as the city will agree that we'll almost go to the point, at least theoretically, we haven't gotten one done yet, to have it just be a direct deposit right from their check right to the bank as they get paid every 2 weeks. So I think there's some of those discussions in place that we have some pretty powerful ways we can make those arrangements. So on the equity side, we don't have a lot of down payment that's required, and we're willing to take that risk of going to the higher levels of loan to value, like 97, 98, that sort of thing. I think that's the first sale. I think when you get to the second sale, there's also will be limits on, market rate increases in value of the property. There'll be some constraints there that'll be put in place through deed restrictions, so that when that person gets around to selling, that they're going to have a limited upside if they stay there for. It'll be graduated over a number of years. So if they stay there for 40 years or 30 years or 20 years, then all of the deed restrictions could fall off, and they wouldn't have to worry about it. But if they're going to be there for 3 or 4 or 5 years, then it'll be a graduated scale for the amount of equity they will be able to retain for themselves and from a value proposition. So the legal counsel and the city manager's office, David Brooks, who was my predecessor, is our deputy city manager. He's been working with legal counsel to craft that. I haven't gotten a report back that that's ready for prime time. We've been focused more on how are we going to build this thing, as opposed to how we're going to do the deed restriction. But they do have a draft that I just haven't been privy to seeing the final product.
Great. Okay, cool. That was exactly what I was asking.
I think that's what I would comment. I've worked in Rhode Island, I've worked in Connecticut, and I've worked up here in New Hampshire, and Rhode Island and Connecticut both have deed restrictions that, and their affordability mechanisms can be pretty clunky. It's not an easy thing to work with, and especially if you have a rising interest rate market, which we've seen in the last few years. There's likely a lot of the people that might have bought affordable housing in Rhode Island and Connecticut that are underwater on their equity right now, because it's based on the income of the person coming in purchasing it. It causes some issues, because if the interest rates go up, the cost of the mortgage goes up, the percentage of someone's ability to buy goes down, and the value of the house goes down as a consequence. So there are some what I refer to as yield-free risk that come into some of these schemes about how we do deed restrictions around affordable housing. They really could put people in harm's way if they don't live there for a very long time. So obviously, if you live in any house over a period of 10 years, you're probably going to make it through several economic cycles. You'll be okay. It's the short-term ones. And where we ran in when I was in Connecticut, we had a lot of folks that were buying these properties that they worked for the Navy, because we had a huge naval yard there. And they were there for 3 years and they had to leave. And we ran into some significant issues with some of the affordable housing mechanisms on that 3-year turnaround that the Navy guys and the Navy families endured. And some of them had to write checks when they left. And that's not a good place for having somebody lose all of their equity. Yeah, I think we're looking at, it's going to be a homeowners association that will create, that goes and they'll own all of the community property of the cottage development. And it'll just be their responsibility to take care of the care and feeding and maintenance of the common grounds. And again, well-designed, thoughtful, the design goes into that in a terrific way. I'm looking at question above that one, during the legislative discussion a few years ago, tiny homes, building code and stair grade and obstacle. Yeah, I think tiny homes, I've spoken with my building officials on multiple occasions about this. The issue that we've run into with tiny homes is that most of the time they don't meet building code. And the way we're established right now in Lebanon is that it would be very hard, if at all, to be able to permit one of these as a permanent structure, because they don't meet the building code. It would require further revisions of the building code, at least the way we interpret it here in Lebanon, to be able to allow for tiny homes to come into play. Again, we're looking at these houses being full connected sewer and water, having all of those services, and full homes not having to use sort of the tiny home design. Yes, we are fortunate. We have more than enough sewer and water capacity. We did a study a couple years ago. We found some constraints in the water and the sewer systems. We were able to get those fixed, and we are blessed with a capacity to go to we could take a population, I believe, of about 25,000 without having to do any upgrades on our sewer and water systems. We are looking at a water change, because right now Mascoma Lake is our water supply. Mascoma Lake has been subject to bacteria blooms in the winter, or not in the winter time, but in the summertime. It puts our water at risk and causes us significant treatment issues. So we're actually looking at siting a new ground well down by the Connecticut River in one of the very large aquifer, good solid quality water. But we're working towards that way to have a more resilient water supply so that we're not subject to surface water that is going to be having different problems relative to climate change, as well as septic maintenance and how much nitrates are going into that water and then causing cryptobacteria blooms, causing our water supply to have problems. You want the tap to have nice water, you want the flush to go away, and those two things we strive to make happen. Any other questions anybody got?
I have one or two of my own that I will in our couple of minutes that we got left there, Nate and Catheryn.
Yeah.
So I think this is still somewhat up in the air the last time we talked, but what is kind of the kind of sales price that you're hoping to kind of target with the Barrows Street?
Barrows Street, we're hoping to hit under 400. We really would like to be in the 300 range, but boy, it's going to be our initial number on the bill came back a little higher than what we thought it would be. That's why we have our clerk that works that's coming in to help do some value engineering to help get us a little more nuanced. But also our first numbers came from one of our larger, more commercial type project teams that we do a lot of business with the city. They did that initial run on the numbers. It's likely that when we get into more residential type builders that our numbers will get a little bit more competitive. But it's engaging the subcontractors market around the region is going to be important. These are all going to be modularized. We're working with the modular company to be able to have it be a modular design, have it be built off site. All we have to do on site is to put in the infrastructure and the foundation, bring the house in, do the modular, installation. We are going to have some interior fit out costs for painting and things along those lines, but yet, ideally, we get that 375 to 400 range is where we would really love to be. But ultimately, that's a really tough task, even with the advantages that the city has, which is the Housing Champion grant, as well as having land that's more or less cost-free. Still, you got to move dirt and build up, pound nails. There's a lot of expense in the market right now.
Great. Thank you. And Catheryn, can you talk a little bit? I mean, I know you're kind of the pattern book. I don't think is quite done yet, but kind of initial interest you've heard from kind of potential people of that once it is ready to go.
We've had a few people ask, and the one person is a property management group who own rental properties in town, and they own a vacant lot, and they wanted to split it and then put 2 stacked triplexes, so to create 6 new units of housing. And then we had a resident who wanted to add an ADU to their side yard. And then Nate and I have a meeting next week with another resident who's interested in a triplex or quadplex. So we've had some interest. Nothing's been built yet. No permits have been issued, but definitely calls of interest.
We also have not sort of beat the drum. We want to have everything all in order before we go out and really start sort of talking about this publicly and saying, yep, this is ready to go. We also have some other elements that are involved in this, which we're not directly in control of, but the Upper Valley Business Alliance is looking at some different financing schemes to help people build ADUs. And so we're also going to be working and trying to coordinate with some of the modular housing folks and the supply chain, being able to help identify some opportunities there to help, in effect, build out what I call the sort of an easy button. But at this point, we just have to get the design book set. We haven't gotten that done yet. And again, it's contractual obligation problems that we're trying to work through with legal counsel. If we can get through that with the vendor we have, that'll be terrific. If we can't, we're going to have to almost create our own book. That might be an option that we have to do. But I think understanding that book, the design book is key to the proposition. But it's also not an easy thing to pull together because it's complex. And again, when you're looking at vendors who have different building codes, it causes a problem that has to be overcome. Great.
I'm not seeing any other questions. I'll give folks one more opportunity to put questions in the chat. I do have one final question for you guys, going back to the kind of process for kind of identifying the Barrows Street site for other communities that may be interested. You talk a little bit about kind of the GIS exercise. I don't think it was overly complex, but kind of just the process you went to kind of figure out if this was
we just kind of went through did searches at GIS, said here are the city-owned parcels, and then you start having your planner look at those, say, you know, is there available water? Is there available sewer? What's the road look like? Is there any possibility of being able to build this, put it all together? And you start going through that. Now we have processed, we also had to run this through our Conservation Commission, through the zoning board, the planning board. All of those boards got a chance to get their eyes on the possibilities with these lots. They developed further recommendations to the city. But a couple of these lots that we were able to find were left over. They're orphans from you know, DOT projects and city road projects, bridge projects. That's where a lot of them came from. But the vast majority came from old tax sales that could date back way well in the past. But GIS should be able to, you can conduct a research. Here's all the properties that are owned by the city. And then you just methodically start going through those and saying, okay, some of them are just slivers. Some of them are going to be buildable. Some of them are going to be on the top of a mountain that you're never going to get to.
And if this goes well, we already have like other lots in mind. So hopefully it'll continue.
Yep.
Great. Well, and that did remind me of one more thing. I think we're probably going to do additional webinar in the future, but as part of kind of in the Lebanon model, and I did see Representative Stavis joining us today. There was language passed in the state budget in House Bill 2, creating this kind of pattern partners in housing program. Unfortunately, there's no appropriation for it, but it will provide a kind of opportunity for municipalities that are interested for kind of a streamlined process for taking in the Lebanon model of taking municipally owned land that they want to develop into housing and going through either first letting our office, BEA and OPD, know about that. So we're going to have a centralized list of those properties, as well as allowing for special site plan review committees, technical review committees to kind of help do the review and approval to kind of streamline the permitting for those. So we'll be putting out more information about that coming up, but just something for folks to know about. I think we've just about reached the end of the hour. I'm going to take back control here. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Catheryn and Nate. This was great. Folks, you can hold for next month, Thursday, August 21st on your calendar. We'll be doing webinar will be about zoning for family childcare, another hot topic. So thank you again. I think Alvina just put the link to the webinar feedback survey in the chat, and we'll also be following up with everybody that registered today. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks much.
Thank you.